The fact that we can't break all ties with Saudi Arabia, the fact that we can't twist their arm and get them to behave like civilized culture on the world stage at this point. So they're jailing and caning this one atheist blogger, Raif Badawi. I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing his name. It's an absolute scandal, the fact that we can't apply more pressure to them, and that isn't, as far as I can tell, entirely explained by our dependence on oil and our unwillingness. We have the technology to break this dependence on oil. The fact that we have such entrenched financial interests that's keeping us tied to oil, and that the whole military-industrial complex is tuned to safeguard those interests for us in the world out of necessity.
Because those interests they've been monetized, they've been controlled, they've been monopolized.
Roll back the clock 50 years. There, I'm sure, was not an alternative to being dependent on oil. Right? There's a certain point, so we're totally dependent on oil. Civilization just needs petrochemicals to survive, and they all happen to be buried in the ground inconveniently under the palaces of these religious maniacs. That may have been the situation then. So how culpable are we for securing our interests, and not just we, the U.S., but the West, at that point, by entering a relationship with the House of Saud? That's one question. That may have been a marriage of necessity, and there have been marriages of necessity with tyrants, I think, in the past. But now, the fact that we can't sprint to the finish line and get off of oil, right? We know this is a dwindling resource. We know it's a disaster for climate change. We know that there would be the financial and technological renaissance that's waiting if we all, just grab Elon Musk's coattails and go towards sustainable energy. And we're funding both sides of the war on terror. It makes absolutely no sense. So we should just make a full court press in the direction of sustainability, energy security, and getting ourselves into a position to say to people like the Saudis, you treat your bloggers better, or we're going to bankrupt you, right? I mean, it's just all their wealth is coming out of the ground, right? So the moment we don't need this wealth or need to defend it, we'd be in a much better position to demand that people treat women better throughout the world, and they treat they honor free speech, etc. So I think it's a scandal that we are not doing that, and I think we are culpable for doing that. But given what would happen to us in the near term if we lost access to oil, and again, I'm not just talking about us, I'm talking about Europe and just the whole world. It's been a very difficult situation to be in, and it's understandable that we have gotten into this situation. But I don't find it understandable now that we aren't sprinting away for it. I can grant someone like Chomsky 80-90% of his thesis, right? So I think he pushes forward into kind of masochistic voodoo a little bit, but we have done horrific things historically, right? And the question is just how far you want to walk back in your time machine. But starting with our treatment of the Native Americans on up, and it depends on who the we is, but we being the United States, right? So we get here, we start behaving badly, and we behave badly for a very long while, and we have done terrible things, and yet it is also true that we have enemies we haven't made. There are people who have had the benefit of everything the West has to offer, who are waking up today deciding to join ISIS for reasons that have nothing to do with U.S. foreign policy. Or if they do have something to do with U.S. foreign policy, it's based on a theological grievance. It's not based on any real political concern for the lives of the Palestinians. It's based on you've got infidels too close to Muslim holy sites. And you have... So the problem, the intellectual and moral problem I've spent more time focused on is the problem of someone like Jihadi John, right? The guy he's got a degree in computer science, right? He comes from a upper middle class background in the UK. He's got all the opportunity anyone could want. There are at least 3 billion people, probably something like 5 billion people, who would who would trade places with him to be in a position of such opportunity in this world. And yet the opportunity he wants to take is to move to Iraq or Syria and, cut the heads off of journalists and aid workers. Journalists and aid workers, and not Navy SEALs they captured. They want to kill the aid workers. It's not an accident. It's not something that's not like a perversion of their impulse. It's not like, oh, I would really wish this guy wasn't an aid worker or a journalist, but he's the only guy we have. No, this is their commitments are that horrible, right? And you have to explain how, and this is something that someone like Abby Martin and someone like Noam Chomsky, this is the phenomenon they really don't explain. How is it that someone with all the opportunity, who's never been victimized by anyone, how is it that he is committed to the most abhorrent and profligate misuse of human life, where he's just ready to burn up the world, right? And now how do you get tens of thousands of people like this coming from first world societies? And so given that phenomenon, then what explains the commitments of the people who don't have all those opportunities, right? The people who are born in these societies and are shell-shocked and who have understandable grievances against us, right? They are part of the collateral damage. We've been bombing over there, after all, right? So it's no mystery that they would hate the West, right? Some of them. I mean, some of them still love the West. Some of them still are trying to get out. Some of them, I hear from atheists in these countries who don't hate the West. I mean, they don't follow Abby Martin's line on this. They understand why we were bombing in their neighborhoods, right? But the fact is, this is really like a science experiment. There are pristine cases of people who have no rational grievance, who devote their lives to waging jihad, and they're not mentally ill. That problem is scaling. The thing that I worry about is that is a meme that is spreadable. You don't have to ever meet anyone affiliated with a terrorist organization to get this idea into your head. I have a blog post, I believe it's called Islam and the Misuses of Ecstasy, where I put an example of the call to prayer, right? Which I think, there's some that sound kind of ratty, but a nice call to prayer, I think, is one of the most beautiful sounding things humanity's ever produced, right? I mean, that hits me, that gets into my bones, right? I don't have to imagine what a devout Muslim is feeling when he hears the call to prayer. I think it's absolutely beautiful, right? And
without even knowing the language.
Exactly, right? And I'm not, without ever having been a Muslim or believing any, it's like, so if that sound, if that ritual was purposed towards some other end, right? If that ritual just was signifying, let's all get up in the morning and consider how profound human consciousness is, and consider our togetherness on this, rock spinning through, empty space, and realize that we just have this common project to make the world beautiful, right? If that was what that meant, right? I would just want a minaret, right next to my house. I would be totally on board with the experience of participating in that. So I'm totally empathetic there. And I went through, many other instances of this where something I'm seeing in the Muslim world, I really grok how beautiful and meaningful and captivating this is for people. But then at the end, I put in a Quranic recitation and sermon by I forgot his name now, but some sheikh who's got, like 10 times the number of Twitter followers you have, right? I mean, he's not a fringe figure. He's a Muslim rock star. And, you see the translation of what he's giving, this tear-filled recitation of the Quran, which again is beautiful, right? He's a great singer. And, it's a packed house in wherever it was, Saudi Arabia or Yemen, but what is being said there is so ethically ugly, right? Essentially celebrating the tortures of hell, right? And just expressing a certainty that infidels are going to go to hell, and how this is you have to organize your life around this question, but how to escape the torments of hell, and the only way to do it is to be a true believer in the Quran and Muhammad, etc. And this is at the center the mandala of their ethical concern. Nothing matters, but nothing in this life matters but avoiding hellfire. And so there's a kind of a ghastly perversion of this impulse that I think many of us feel. I certainly feel it, to transcend yourself, to experience bliss and ecstasy and compassion, and you know, it is very much it's very much like Burning Man for people. I mean, it's like imagine if Burning Man were just as ecstatic as it was, and attracting all the smart people that it attracts, but strewn throughout it was a message of just true divisiveness. Like, everyone else who's not here is going to be tortured for eternity, and they deserve it, and we shouldn't be their friends, and we should fuck them over any way we can when we get out of this place. And if God had wanted to enlighten them, he would have, but he hasn't, so we're the only ones here. And a durable message of us, them thinking that just cannot be dissolved, right? That's what's going on in the Muslim world. And it's a huge problem, because it's pulling all the strings of, you know, I mean, it's not just Islam, obviously. Christianity has a version of this, and all religions in principle have a version of this, but there are differences. There is no version of jihad that is, you know, there's no Buddhist jihad. It's not to say that Buddhists can't do terrible things, and it's not to say you can't find Buddhist reasons for doing terrible things, but jihad is a jihad, martyrdom, paradise. This is the jewel, you know, the horrible jewel that so many millions of people are contemplating in an Islamic context.